there are parallels to medicine and the spiritual side. And sometimes we refer to our attraction to being brought into the medical world as a calling. We hear this sometimes about, people on the religious side, that they had a calling. So I want to tee it up by asking Marta, and then all of my colleagues too. I want you to think about this. Was there any moment in particular where you can think back and maybe realize that there was more to our role in medicine, or medicine in general, that is just, it's not purely a physical thing, but there's a spiritual side to this? Was there maybe an epiphany or some defining moment where you said, hey, this is really quite humbling, and there's so much more to this. There maybe is a higher power involved. So, Dr. Illueca, let me let you answer that first, and then we'll start going around the room.
Sure. Thank you, Desmond. And thank you for your kind words. I think this is probably the best moment to say, it is my obligation to say, I do not have any conflicts of interest. So I know my colleagues would want to know that. And at the present time, I work with the Episcopal Church. This is not a fashion statement. This is a white collar, because I'm a member of the ordained clergy of the Episcopal Church. So that's kind of where my journey took me in the more recent part of my life. But epiphanies, there were quite a few in my life, but specifically talking about being in medicine, I became a pediatrician and then a gastrointestinal specialist within pediatrics. They call those PITS GI. And I did have quite a few epiphanies, but I think that the if I can give you a hybrid answer, trying to bring them together, it would really be something that we in pediatrics are very blessed to experience, which is when we serve as doctors and we fight with the little child, the little baby who has a serious health condition, and we battle together with them. And many times we actually feel defeated. Many times we think that we run out of things to do. And there's going to be a moment in many cases where there's the turning of the corner and things start to get better. And eventually, many of these little patients get better. And as a pediatrician, you get a chance to see them later on as they are growing and they come back to you. And I think that when I had those early experiences of seeing a little baby, a little patient get better from a serious condition, that's when I had to, say there's definitely something bigger than us working here. Because as doctors, we understand illness, and we understand when the body is in a very precarious condition, and when we know that we have run out of things to do, and sometimes we do run out of things to do, but sometimes we start to see a change. And those are the moments that I would say were my epiphanies in realizing that there was something really deeper and more meaningful into the work we were doing, but also in helping out a life, helping a life blossom in front of our eyes.
Yeah, I think to expound on that a little bit, I just shake my head when I hear some colleagues sometimes talk about the people that they healed. And I said, you didn't heal anybody. You're just the middleman in all this. And so you've been given some gifts and you are using them now to, kind of move things along. But the human body is designed to heal itself, and it's an engineering marvel. My epiphany was during gross anatomy, when I just started looking at the body and every nook and cranny, every bump, every bit of fascia, whatever it was, the levers and pulleys. It's like, no man designed this. That's absurd to think that. And we're not even talking at the cellular level. So I find it all so humbling, and yet it's like so gratifying to be able to take this base of knowledge that's ever growing, ever evolving, and to apply it to our fellow man. And so I just, this is where my perspective, and it's, we do our best. And when we fail, we're not really failing. If you've given it all, sometimes it's just, this is the law of nature too. So I just, that's, I don't want to take this and dominate the conversation. Anybody else? Rick, I know you've got something to add on this. So, tell a story, or just, I know you've had some moment too.
Well, Marta, I told this story the other day, so I'll make it quick because they've all heard it before. But I was a surgical intern, and back then we didn't go to any place with alphabetical names like ICU, ER, or OR. We stayed on the floor. But as a surgical intern, you were really a sponge. And so one night, the chief resident at my place, who'd been there about 8 years, called down and says, "We got a patient down here. If the floor's quiet, do you want to come down and learn about drips in the ventilator?" So I said, "Sure." So I came down. It was like 3 a.m, 2:30, something like that. And he said, "I'm going to bed. Patients on everything you can imagine, so you can do whatever you want because they're not going to live long, but go ahead and learn about the drips." So I looked at all this stuff, and the patient was on epinephrine and Levophed and all these drugs, and the ventilator, and paralyzed, tape on their eyes, all those things. So what I did was I turned off everything, and the patient's blood pressure came up a little bit. And then I went to talking in their ear. So I said, every time their blood pressure would come down, I'd say, "Mr. So-and-so, your family wants you to live. You got to live." And the blood pressure would creep up a little bit. And then I started shaking the bed because I got tired of whispering in his ear, getting up and down. I'd shake the bed and his blood pressure would come up. And at no time did I reinstitute any of the medications. I left those off, and his blood pressure climbed from like 50 and hovered in the 90s to 100 for the next time frame. So when the family came in later that night, or that morning, I told them, I know things don't look good, but you need to whisper in Dad's ear and talk to him because he's in there. He hears you. And of course, every time they did, blood pressure would come up and that kind of thing. Well, I went on to the day, and of course, went home that night. I checked in, he was still alive, and I went home, and the next day he had passed away in the night. And this always gets me, but the family came back and was so appreciative of the fact that I had told them that he was in there. He actually heard them. And that was my first contact with what I felt was real spiritual. And I said, whatever that is, whatever you believe, there was something bigger than me and bigger than them. And so that kind of set me on a path. And I was telling the folks the other day, I said, that one, I can walk myself back to that room in my head. So that was my contact. It was pretty, hit me pretty good.
Thank you so much for joining us for the discussion today. If you would like to learn more about our guest, head on over to our Patreon page, where you can access exclusive content, including the full segment of our show. Never want to miss an Inside the Doctor's Lounge clip? Be sure to click the subscribe button to our MD Coaches YouTube channel. As always, we appreciate suggestions for future show topics. Let us know what you're thinking in the comments below. And finally, special thanks to Ryan Jones, who created and performs our theme music for the show.